Walmart has quietly canceled orders for 12 food items, and shoppers won't notice right away because of empty shelves. They'll notice in a more frustrating way. The familiar category is still there. The shelf is still there. But the exact product they've been buying for years is suddenly gone. Walmart doesn't need a big announcement. It only has to order less, shrink package sizes, cut back on mid-tier options, and keep the fastest-selling items. From the outside, the store still looks fully stocked. But inside, a few familiar foods are quietly changing before your grocery bill can explain why. This isn't a call to panic. It's about recognizing early signals. Fewer choices, higher prices, and the weekly staples your family depends on becoming harder to find in the exact versions you usually buy. Stay with us until the end, because the number one item isn't rare at all, but it could change the very first routine of the day for millions of families across the country. Number 12. Ground beef. The first item Walmart has quietly been cutting back on isn't a luxury product. It's not expensive steak. It's not something only higher-income families buy. It's ground beef, the meat that shows up in millions of American dinners every week. Weekend burgers, Taco Tuesday, spaghetti with meat sauce, grandma's meatloaf, a pot of chili on a cold day, a casserole that feeds the whole family. Because it's so familiar, most shoppers never imagine ground beef could be one of the first items to get squeezed. But Raymond saw the problem before it showed up on store shelves. Raymond works in the refrigerated receiving section of a large distribution center. His job isn't to predict the future or tell dramatic stories. He simply compares two very boring things: expected orders and the number of cases that actually arrive. And with ground beef, those two numbers started drifting apart. It wasn't one late shipment. It wasn't one messy week in the warehouse. It was week after week of deliveries coming in below what they were supposed to be. Order fill rates fell to roughly 65 to 70%. Put simply, if the system expected to receive 100 cases of ground beef, only about 65 to 70 were actually arriving. When that happens week after week, it's no longer a shipping problem. It's a sign of a supply chain that is quietly shrinking. And the reason goes much deeper than the meat counter. According to the USDA's cattle inventory report from early 2026, the U.S. beef cow herd had fallen to about 27.6 million head, the lowest level since 1961. This also comes after several consecutive years of herd declines. As breeding herds shrink, fewer calves are born, and cattle imports from Mexico face disruptions. Pressure builds across the entire beef system at the same time. Walmart doesn't need to hang a sign saying supplies are getting tight. They simply order less, and shoppers feel it in a very ordinary way. Picture Frank, a man in his 60s living in the suburbs of Ohio. For years, he bought ground beef every weekend to make burgers for his grandchildren. He used to walk up to the meat case, grab a package, toss it into the cart, and keep moving. Lately, Frank has started stopping. He looks at the price, looks at the weight, looks at the price again, then starts doing the math on whether a backyard family barbecue is still as normal as it used to be. That's the most dangerous moment in food inflation. Not when the product disappears, but when a family tradition starts requiring a calculator. Today, ground beef at many Walmart stores typically runs around $6.50 to $7 per pound. If cattle supplies continue tightening, seeing $8 to $9 per pound by the end of 2026 is no longer difficult to imagine. And when ground beef rises, the pressure doesn't stop with beef. Many families shift to chicken, pork, sausage, or lower-cost frozen meats. When millions of people make the same switch, those alternatives start feeling price pressure too. So the smart move isn't to clear out the meat case. If your family regularly uses ground beef, consider picking up a modest amount when you find a good price. Around 8 to 10 pounds is enough for many meals without turning your freezer into a warehouse. Divide it into meal-sized portions. Flatten the freezer bags to save space. Write the date on the outside and freeze it the same day. Properly stored ground beef can maintain good quality for roughly 4 to 6 months. And if Walmart has already started tightening up on a basic item like ground beef, the next item is even more interesting because it ends up in the morning cup of millions of Americans. Number 11. Coffee. Coffee doesn't disappear in a way that causes panic. It disappears in a much more subtle way. The shelves are still full. Bags of coffee are still lined up in neat rows. The smell of roasting is still familiar. From a distance, everything looks normal. But when you walk closer and look for the exact coffee you drink every morning, the same roast level, the same bag size you've bought for years, you suddenly notice something strange. It's no longer there. This is the easiest kind of shortage to miss. No empty shelves, no purchase limits, no shoppers fighting over the last few bags, just fewer choices. The premium varieties disappear first, then the specialty roasts. Then certain bag sizes stop showing up as consistently as they once did. Eventually, shoppers still see plenty of coffee on the shelf, but not the specific one they actually want. The reason starts thousands of miles away from Walmart. Brazil produces roughly 40% of the world's coffee supply. When a country that large experiences severe drought, the entire global coffee market feels the effects. During 2024 and 2025, dry weather placed significant pressure on Arabica growing regions, the type of bean commonly used in many higher quality roasted coffees. Some industry estimates suggested major production declines, with figures in some cases reaching around 35%. When supplies of higher quality coffee become tighter, retailers tend to do something very practical. Keep the fastest selling products, cut slower moving varieties, reduce premium options, and focus on items with stronger turnover. That's why the shelves still look full, but the selection gets smaller. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, coffee prices were up roughly 33% year over year during the early part of 2026. Today, many popular bags of coffee sell for around $12 to $18, depending on the brand, roast, and package size. If weather pressures, transportation costs, and logistics challenges continue, seeing prices reach $16 to $24 per bag by the summer or end of 2026 would no longer be surprising. What makes this different is that coffee isn't just another grocery item. It's part of the morning ritual for millions of people. A hot cup before work, a coffee pot sitting on the kitchen counter at 6 a.m. A small routine that helps many people feel like the day is still under control. So if your household drinks coffee every day, the smart move isn't waiting until prices spike before buying. Pick up an extra 3 or 4 bags when you find a good sale. Divide them into smaller portions, seal them tightly, and keep them away from light and air. If possible, store them in the freezer to preserve flavor longer. Coffee hasn't disappeared, but your familiar coffee may disappear before you realize it. And if even the item sitting in the morning cup is seeing fewer choices, the next item may surprise even more families, because it was once considered the cheapest breakfast in America. Number 10. Eggs. If there's one food that still reminds people what it feels like to stand helpless in front of a grocery shelf, it's eggs. Not because eggs are a luxury, but because they used to be cheap, fast, easy to cook, and almost always available. One egg could become breakfast. A dozen could stretch through an entire week. Yet when supply gets shaken, even the simplest item in the refrigerator can make shoppers stop and do the math. What's concerning is that this time, the signals aren't as loud as before. The shelves aren't empty. But some of the larger cartons disappear first. The cheapest eggs sell out faster. Organic and cage-free varieties are there one week and missing the next. Shoppers still see eggs on the shelf, but the familiar choices no longer feel as dependable as they once did. That's the most dangerous kind of shortage, the quiet kind. According to the USDA Egg Market Report, the U.S. egg industry continues to feel the effects of highly pathogenic avian influenza, or HPAI. When an outbreak appears at a farm, disease control measures can sharply reduce the number of laying hens in a short period of time. And rebuilding a flock isn't like flipping a switch. It takes months before new hens begin producing eggs consistently. Meanwhile, demand hasn't weakened at all. As beef, chicken, canned fish, and other protein sources become more expensive, eggs are often one of the first alternatives families turn to. They're easy to cook, easy to portion, and work well for seniors, people living alone, and families that need quick meals with solid nutrition. According to BLS Food CPI data, eggs remain one of the most volatile categories in the grocery basket. At many Walmart stores, a dozen large eggs typically sells for around $4 to $6, and in some areas prices run even higher when local supplies tighten. Eggs don't need to disappear again to make shoppers nervous. Prices only need to inch higher. The 18-count cartons only need to sell out first. The familiar brand only needs to become harder to find. And suddenly breakfast for an entire family starts looking different. The smart move isn't buying 10 cartons and letting them spoil. Pick up an extra dozen or two when prices are reasonable, but only if your household will actually use them. Always keep eggs in their original carton and store them in a stable section of the refrigerator, not in the door where temperatures constantly fluctuate. Eggs already taught American shoppers a very clear lesson. Sometimes the most familiar item is the one that surprises you the most. And if eggs are starting to show signs of becoming fragile again, the next item is even quieter, because its shelf still looks full, while the choices inside are disappearing one small piece at a time. Number 9. Frozen vegetables. The frozen vegetable aisle rarely makes anyone nervous. It's always brightly lit, freezing cold, and full of color. Bags of broccoli, peas, carrots, mixed vegetables, green beans, and stir-fry blends fill the freezers as if the supply could never run out. But here's what most shoppers miss. The frozen aisle doesn't need empty shelves to signal a problem. It only needs fewer choices every week. Don't count brands. Count SKUs. A vegetable that once came in several bag sizes now comes in only one. A mixed vegetable line that used to have a regular version, a budget version, and an organic version now only has the more expensive option. Store brand products appear less often. Family-size value bags stop showing up consistently. From a distance, the freezer section still looks full. But when you go looking for the exact one you always buy, the answer is often the same. Not today. That isn't always a shortage. Sometimes it's a reduction in choice. As ingredient costs, labor expenses, cold storage, and transportation costs rise, suppliers often stop maintaining the same product lineup they once did. They focus on the fastest-selling products or the ones with the strongest profit margins. As a result, premium organic vegetables may still be available, while the budget-friendly family bags disappear first. According to USDA forecasts, fresh vegetable prices could rise around 7 to 8% this year, and frozen vegetables aren't separate from fresh vegetables. They come from many of the same growing regions. Unusual weather in Florida and other major production areas can reduce supplies at the source and eventually create pressure throughout the frozen food section as well. The people most affected aren't always the ones buying the most. It could be an older adult living alone who uses half a bag of frozen vegetables to make soup, a retired couple that relies on peas and carrots for quick dinners, a family with young children who will only eat a specific frozen broccoli they've grown accustomed to. When that exact bag disappears, even a simple meal becomes harder. Today, many common frozen vegetable bags sell for around $2 to $3. If supply pressures and cold storage costs continue rising, seeing prices reach $3.50 to $5 for popular varieties isn't hard to imagine. The best approach is to buy a little at a time. Each trip to Walmart, pick up 1 or 2 bags of vegetables your family actually eats. Focus on variety: broccoli, peas, carrots, green beans, and mixed stir-fry vegetables. Don't fill the freezer with a single item, because being prepared isn't about buying more. It's about buying the right things. The frozen vegetable aisle may still look completely full, but when the affordable and familiar options start disappearing first, observant shoppers should recognize the signal before everyone else does. Number 8. Canned tuna. Canned tuna is the kind of food many people only think about when they need a quick meal. 1 can of tuna, 2 slices of bread, a little mayonnaise, and lunch is done. No long cooking time, no freezer required, no electricity needed if things go sideways. That's why tuna remains a pantry staple in many American households, especially among seniors, people living alone, and anyone looking for an affordable, compact, and easy-to-rotate source of protein. This is also the kind of signal Raymond says is difficult to spot with the naked eye. The tuna shelf still has products on it, but the mid-range items aren't arriving as consistently as they used to. To a shopper, that may seem insignificant. To someone reviewing inventory orders, it's a sign that the category is being narrowed. It starts with the disappearance of the middle tier. You still see tuna on the shelf, but the varieties that aren't the cheapest and aren't the most expensive, the dependable brands with familiar flavors, start appearing less often. What remains is usually either the budget option or the premium option. When retailers reduce their product assortment, they rarely cut the fastest-selling products first. They cut the products in the middle: lower margins, slower turnover, and harder pricing. With tuna, that middle segment happens to be exactly what many families rely on. And the pressure isn't coming only from the fish, it's coming from the can. Every can of tuna requires metal, labels, fuel, transportation, and international supply chains. A large portion of the canned seafood market depends on global sourcing, including supply routes through Southeast Asia. When tariffs, shipping costs, and aluminum prices rise, even a small can of fish stops being as inexpensive as it once was. Today, a typical can of tuna costs around $1.50 to $2. If aluminum costs, import tariffs, and transportation expenses remain elevated, seeing prices reach $2.50 to $3.50 per can is no longer difficult to imagine. For the average shopper, that may sound like just another dollar, but for someone who eats tuna 3 or 4 times a week, it becomes a real increase. The smart approach isn't filling a shopping cart with 100 cans. Keep roughly 24 cans in the pantry and spread them across different options. Tuna packed in water, tuna packed in oil, canned salmon, and canned chicken. Use the oldest first and restock when you find a good price. Because when fresh protein becomes more expensive, canned protein is where many people turn. And when too many people head toward the same shelf at the same time, the cheapest option rarely stays cheap for long. Number 7. Breakfast cereal. The cereal aisle at Walmart can fool you very easily. It's still long, still packed with bright colors, still filled with Cheerios, Lucky Charms, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Frosted Flakes, Raisin Bran, and dozens of other boxes that look like nothing has changed. Shrinkflation is when the price stays the same, but the amount inside gets smaller. SKU cuts happen when companies stop selling versions that no longer generate enough profit. The two usually happen together very quietly. There are no warning signs, just a lighter box and a few familiar choices that never come back. General Mills, the company behind Cheerios, Lucky Charms, and Cinnamon Toast Crunch, has reported softer sales and pressure on profits. Some Cheerios varieties have also been discontinued. As grain costs, sugar costs, packaging expenses, and transportation costs rise, food companies keep the fastest-selling products and cut the rest. Shoppers feel this in their kitchens before they know what to call it. A mother opens a cereal box one morning and realizes the bag inside seems smaller. A grandfather goes looking for the variety his grandkids love and can't find the familiar version anymore. A family that used to make one box last all week suddenly finds it nearly empty by Thursday. Not because they're eating more, but because the box is giving them less. Today, many popular cereal boxes sell for around $4 to $6. Larger or premium varieties can easily reach $5.50 to $8. If Walmart continues prioritizing products with the fastest turnover, weaker selling flavors and lower margin package sizes will likely disappear first. The solution is simple. Pick up 2 or 3 extra boxes of the varieties your family actually eats when you find a good price. Don't buy unfamiliar flavors just because they're on sale. Store cereal in a dry place, seal it after opening, and pay attention to the price per ounce instead of just the sticker price on the box. Because in the cereal aisle, the most expensive thing isn't always the listed price. Sometimes it's the amount of food quietly disappearing inside the box. Number 6. Olive oil. Olive oil isn't a rare product, but it's becoming one of the items Walmart is quietly reducing the fastest. You can still see an entire row of green and brown bottles on the shelf. But if you look closely, the familiar 1-liter bottles, the mid-priced brands, and the reasonably priced extra virgin varieties are starting to appear less often. What remains is usually either the very expensive premium option or a smaller bottle with a higher price per ounce. That's how supply changes before shoppers notice. In many American kitchens, olive oil is part of everyday life. A little on a salad, a little for pan-searing fish, a drizzle over roasted vegetables or warm bread. But behind that small bottle is a supply chain that depends heavily on Spain, Italy, and Portugal, countries that have faced years of drought and extreme heat. At the same time, shipping costs along major trade routes, including the Strait of Hormuz region, have added even more pressure to imports. The result is easy to see. Olive oil prices in the United States have nearly doubled compared with 2022. A typical bottle now sells for roughly $10 to $16, and if supplies do not recover, prices reaching $14 to $22 in the near future would not be surprising. What's interesting is that many families are no longer switching away from olive oil because of health preferences. They're switching because the price has moved beyond the household budget. That's usually when Walmart prioritizes the fastest-selling products and trims back the middle-tier choices to keep inventory moving efficiently. If your household uses olive oil regularly, the solution isn't stockpiling an entire case. Simply keep 2 or 3 extra bottles on hand, store them in a cool, dark place, and rotate through them as you use them. Being prepared isn't about buying huge amounts. It's about not being forced to buy when prices suddenly jump. Number 5. Peanut butter. One of the most interesting things about grocery stores is that when meat gets expensive, shoppers naturally start drifting toward the peanut butter aisle. No advertising required. No one needs to tell them. It's almost an automatic response for millions of American families. A peanut butter sandwich can be breakfast, lunch, or a high-protein snack at a fraction of the cost of beef or chicken. That's why every time protein prices rise, pressure starts building on this shelf, and Walmart knows it. The peanut butter aisle still looks full, but the family-sized jars often sell out first. Lower sugar, natural, and mid-priced varieties appear less frequently, while smaller containers and premium products tend to remain available longer. This is exactly the kind of inventory reduction most shoppers never notice. According to the USDA Peanut Outlook, the peanut market is influenced by crop yields, processing costs, and consumer demand. When large numbers of families shift toward a lower-cost protein source, demand can rise faster than supply. Today, a typical jar of peanut butter costs around $3 to $5. If demand continues growing alongside higher packaging and transportation costs, seeing prices move into the $5 to $7 range would no longer be surprising. But the most important thing to remember isn't the price. It's the moment your familiar jar suddenly disappears and is replaced by a smaller version or a more expensive one. For budget-conscious households, a reasonable approach is to keep 2 backup jars on hand and always follow a first opened, first used rotation. Don't buy out of fear. Buy it because it's something your family will definitely eat. Because when beef, eggs, and tuna are all under pressure at the same time, a peanut butter sandwich stops being just a simple meal. It becomes the backup plan for millions of American kitchens. And when too many people end up relying on the same backup plan, even the cheapest protein won't stay cheap forever. Number 4. Bananas and avocados. Do you know how much you paid for bananas last week? Most shoppers don't remember. Not because they're careless, but because bananas and avocados are habit purchases. You walk through the produce section, grab a few, drop them into the cart, and keep moving. It's only when the grocery bill gets higher and the bag feels lighter that you realize something has changed. Prices don't have to double to change your behavior. They just have to rise slowly enough that you don't notice you're buying less. At Walmart, bananas currently run around 54 to 58 cents per pound. Avocados are often priced around $1 to $1.50 each, depending on the region and the season. That may not sound dramatic, but the supply chains behind them are highly sensitive. Bananas rely heavily on Costa Rica and Colombia. Avocados depend heavily on Mexico. A stretch of bad weather, higher transportation costs, or slower imports can tighten supply very quickly. This is the hardest kind of order reduction to notice. The produce section still looks full, but the banana displays are smaller. The nicest avocados are harder to find. Prices creep up by a few cents, and shoppers quietly adjust without realizing it. 3 avocados become 2. A large bunch becomes a smaller one. The weekend guacamole bowl gets cut back a little. Nobody calls it a shortage, but behavior has already changed. The smart approach is to buy produce when it's ready to eat, use it efficiently, and minimize waste. Ripe bananas can be sliced and frozen for smoothies or baking. Ripe avocados can be mashed with a little lemon juice and stored in the refrigerator. Don't overload your cart with fresh produce just because you're worried about future prices. With bananas and avocados, being prepared means using them wisely before they spoil. If you've started buying less without ever deciding to buy less, the price has already done its job. Number 3. Canned tropical fruit. Canned tropical fruit is one of those items most people walk past without giving it much thought. A can of pineapple, a can of mandarin oranges, a container of fruit cocktail. They're not flashy, they're not the centerpiece of dinner, and nobody drives to Walmart just to buy them. And that's exactly why they can be an early warning sign. When a product that few people pay attention to starts disappearing, it's often more meaningful than it looks, because nobody is rushing in to buy it. You still see canned fruit on the shelf, but the familiar pineapple variety isn't stocked as consistently as it used to be. The larger cans show up less often. Mid-priced brands get replaced by more expensive ones. A few tropical flavors disappear and never return. That isn't the kind of shortage that makes headlines. It's Walmart quietly reducing choices, something shoppers usually notice only when they need that exact can for a familiar recipe. Picture a Sunday church gathering. Someone brings fruit salad. Someone else makes pineapple upside-down cake. Nothing on the table is fancy, just simple, cool, familiar desserts. But if the canned pineapple people usually buy jumps from $1.50 to nearly $3, or the larger size is no longer available, that simple recipe suddenly costs more. The pressure comes from several directions. Dole and other tropical fruit suppliers depend on international growing and processing regions, including parts of Southeast Asia. Weather affects harvests, transportation increases costs, and every can requires aluminum, which has contributed to higher prices across many canned goods categories. Today, canned tropical fruit typically costs around $1.50 to $2.50 per can. If aluminum costs, shipping expenses, and import pressures remain elevated, seeing prices move into the $2.50 to $4 range is entirely possible. The solution is simple. Keep 4 to 8 cans in the pantry if your family actually uses them. Pineapple, mandarin oranges, fruit cocktail, canned peaches. Choose varieties that work for breakfast, yogurt, baking, or quick desserts. This isn't stockpiling. It's preserving a little flexibility in the kitchen before those small cans start getting everyone's attention too late. Number 2. Dark chocolate and cocoa. Chocolate doesn't disappear from the shelf. The real cocoa disappears first. That's what makes this category worth watching. The sweet, inexpensive chocolate bars with lower cocoa content are still there. But pure cocoa powder, dark chocolate above 60%, higher quality chocolate chips, and baking chocolate varieties are starting to appear less often. For someone buying candy, the change may not be obvious, but for someone who bakes brownies, cookies, muffins, or birthday cakes for the grandkids on the weekend, it becomes much easier to spot. A familiar container of cocoa suddenly costs more. A bag of quality chocolate chips no longer comes in the same size. A dark chocolate bar you used to buy for baking now carries a price that makes you put it back and take a second look. The reason comes down to the global cocoa crisis. West Africa supplies most of the world's cocoa, but drought, extreme weather, and weaker harvests have put significant pressure on the market. Global cocoa prices have risen more than 130% compared with 2023, according to market data widely reported by outlets including Euronews and NASDAQ. When the real ingredient becomes more expensive, retailers tend to keep the fastest-selling mainstream products and reduce premium options. The chocolate aisle still looks full, but the higher quality products disappear first. Today, a typical chocolate bar often costs around $3 to $6. Baking cocoa powder generally sells for about $5 to $8 per container. If cocoa supplies do not recover, products with higher cocoa content will likely remain under the greatest pressure. The practical approach is simple. Keep 3 to 5 containers of cocoa powder or a few bags of chocolate chips if your household actually uses them. Store them in a cool, dry place with a tight seal and keep them away from heat. Don't buy excessive amounts of chocolate bars if your home stays warm, because improper storage can quickly affect quality. A container of cocoa isn't a main meal. But sometimes it's the thing that turns an ordinary afternoon into the smell of brownies in the kitchen, the sound of grandchildren laughing around the table, and the feeling that the family still has something sweet to look forward to. Number 1. Milk and creamer. The final item isn't noteworthy because it's rare. It's noteworthy because it shows up in the first few minutes of the day. Before the news comes on, before the phone starts ringing, before a long day begins, millions of Americans do the same thing. Pour a cup of coffee, add milk, half and half, or coffee creamer, and stand quietly for a few moments at the kitchen counter. If that changes, the whole morning changes. Milk, creamer, and half are facing pressure from several directions at once. Raw milk prices, dairy fat costs, sugar prices, vegetable oils used in creamers, refrigeration expenses, packaging, and transportation. According to USDA Dairy Outlook reports and BLS Dairy CPI data, dairy products remain one of the more sensitive categories in the American grocery basket. Today, a gallon of milk typically costs around $3.50 to $5. Popular coffee creamers often run between $4 and $7. If ingredient costs and logistics expenses continue rising, another 10 to 20% increase would not be surprising. But the bigger issue isn't the price, it's the selection. The creamer you like may not disappear completely. It may simply come in a different size. The promotions become less frequent. Your favorite flavor sells out faster. The larger half and half containers stop showing up consistently. Whole milk is still there, but the exact brand or variety you normally buy isn't available the day you need it. That's how a small change enters everyday life. What's most memorable about today's list isn't that any one of these items is going to disappear tomorrow. It's how quietly things change. Fewer choices, smaller package sizes, higher prices, and familiar products becoming harder to find than they used to be. Smart shoppers don't buy out of panic. They buy because they know their families will actually use it. An extra bag of coffee, a few cans of tuna, a bottle of olive oil, a container of cocoa. Each one is small, but bought at the right time. They can make a kitchen feel a lot more stable. Some people read inventory reports. The rest of us read store shelves. And store shelves are often a few weeks behind reality. That isn't extreme stockpiling. It's how a calm household protects its budget, preserves familiar meals, and avoids being caught off guard by small changes. So out of the 12 items on today's list, which one would you buy a little earlier on your next Walmart trip?